Welcome to the Regional Health Solutions podcast, powered by Statum.
We're your hosts, William Munt and Jaden Frame.
Welcome back to the Regional Health Solutions podcast. In this episode, we're turning our attention to something that underpins every other solution we talk about on this show, which is the people delivering the care and how we're looking after them. Our guest today is Rob Timmings. He's the founder of ECT4Health and a nurse educator with over 25 years of experience. Rob trained at the Royal Brisbane Hospital back in the mid-80s. He cut his teeth in ICU and emergency, and he's spent the better part of 3 decades travelling across Australia delivering face-to-face clinical education. He'll love me for giving away the timelines on all of that. He's also built one of the most engaged nursing communities online with hundreds of thousands of followers across social media. That reach gives him a genuinely unique view of what's happening inside the nursing workforce right now, and in this conversation, you'll hear that passion and his informed insight. In this episode, we talk about burnout, bullying, the erosion of workplace culture post-COVID, and why nurses with 20 years of experience are walking away from the profession. That's all the pessimistic topics. But we also explore what good looks like, which is the role education plays in keeping our clinicians confident and capable, and why face-to-face learning still matters in a world that wants to put everything online. Rob's a Statum partner, and he's honestly one of the best educators that we've ever come across in this industry. Here's our conversation. We are joined here by Rob Timmings. Rob, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.
It's our pleasure. Now, Rob, let's start off with your nursing career. How did you get into nursing? What's the journey been like? What's some highlights?
Oh, golly, it's a long journey. So I actually trained in the mid-1980s. I was hospital trained down in the Royal Brisbane Hospital, back when it was called the Royal Brisbane Hospital. You know, when they had 2 separate campuses, the children's, the women's, and the general. So I trained at the general in Brisbane in the mid-80s. I went essentially straight from high school into nursing, which was kind of unusual in the mid-80s for a bloke to go into nursing. The nursing groups were really large. There were 5 intakes. We had 60 in my intake, and 10% were guys. So we had 6 guys start. 6 men went into student nurses out of the 60. Only 3 of us finished, but you know, a lot sort of dropped out along the way. It wasn't for them, I guess. I always wanted to be a paramedic. So going through high school, I was right into the whole first aid thing and used to go to motorcycle events and BMX events and all of that sort of stuff, doing first aid as a volunteer with that organisation, St. John Ambulance, that everyone knows. And, aspired to be a paramedic. And then when the time came, there were some pretty heavy influences in my family, friends of, mum and dad who were nurses and encouraged me to have a look at nursing. And went for an interview at the Royal Brisbane and at the PA Hospital on the same day. And I said, look, if I get the go, then I'll say yes. And the Royal Brisbane came in first. So RBH got me.
And where does the turn in Rob's career go to the education space and your passion for that, and maybe the segue into ECT4Health?
Okay, it probably started really early for me. I first knew that I was interested in teaching, more the one-to-one sort of teaching stuff, as a clinical facilitator at work, being a new staff member buddy. So I went straight out of my training into intensive care for a year and a half. And towards the end of that year and a half, and I know that seems really young in nursing, only 1.5 years in, but 1.5 years in as an ICU nurse, you were suddenly in a position where when new staff members came through, they wanted to buddy you with somebody who had been there for a while. And I just really enjoyed that one-to-one teaching and, having a really sick, complex patient with a new nurse to intensive care, and I guess coaching them through and indoctrinating them into the ICU mindset. So I kind of really enjoyed that one-to-one teaching to start with. From there, my first love from my training was always emergency, and an opportunity came up for me to be able to go and work in emergency after that 18 months worth of full ICU. And again, you work through the different departments within an emergency department. You get more skilled, you get more experienced, and then one day somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, "Hey, we've got a new staff member. Can you buddy the staff member for a week, or can you take a student for a week?" And I've just fell in love with doing that. And so for the first real 10 to 15 years of my emergency nursing career, I always kind of found myself into a place where people would tap me on the shoulder. The boss would tap me on the shoulder and say, "Hey, we've got a new starter, or we've got a student, or a group of students that are coming through. Will you teach them for a week? Will you coach them for a week?" So I always knew that education was something that I was really interested in. And then the opportunity came up for me to go and do a course. And it was a fairly, at the time when we were running them across Australia, it was a prestige course. It was called the TNCC. It was a trauma nursing course that came out of the United States. There was a college down in Sydney, the Australian College of Emergency Nursing, that was running this program in Australia. And I just longed as an emergency nurse to go and do this trauma course. So I did it. I got really, really good marks. I love the trauma stuff. So I did really well in that particular program. And at the end of the course, I was invited to become an instructor. And that's kind of what really launched my education in front of a classroom career, and teaching stuff with that kind of familiar PowerPoint presentation, stand in front of the class, seminar type teaching. So TNCC is what sort of did it for me, being a TNCC instructor.
Rob, ECT4Health partners with Statham, and we do that because we believe you're one of the best educators in Australia. Can you give us a bit of a background on ECT4Health and how you actually found the courage to go out and form ECT4Health?
Do it privately. Yeah. Look, that has got an interesting story. So from the old days of doing TNCC for a number of years, all the way through to, so I've now been teaching for well over 25 years. ECT4Health was formed in 14 years ago. So 14 years ago, I've had this company. And I was a nurse educator in Toowoomba, based out of a government organisation called the Cunningham Centre. It still runs today, and its focus is rural and remote education to support Queensland health nurses working in rural and remote areas around Queensland. It was a fairly well-funded organisation during the day, and I had a beautiful opportunity to be able to be sent out around the state to do face-to-face education. That's the kind of education that I like to do, and possibly that's where I really honed my craft as a face-to-face presenter, more so than just a teacher, but as a presenter. That classroom awareness and that those sort of teaching skills, and really enjoyed that. I kind of really felt that as an educator, I was better as an educator doing seminar-based education than I was doing necessarily the practical-based education. I felt more comfortable in front of a classroom than I did in front of, say, a simulation. I still do sim, but, if you had to balance what you love, I really like doing the seminar stuff. I like standing in front of a group and sharing my passion and my knowledge. And so one thing led to another. We had yet another state election, and I'm not going to get political here, but when you've got one coloured team in, so we generally talk about a blue team and a red team. We talk about political teams. So the red team and the blue team. So one of the two teams was in power and lost the election. So the new blue team came in and they took over from the red team. And when the blue team came along, they made a commitment to voters that they would shorten the elective surgery waiting list in Queensland. Yep. And that was one of the promises that they made to win the election, and they won the election and they got into power, and of course now they had to keep their promises. And so what they did is they shortened the elective surgery waiting list. They actually met the brief, and kudos to them. But where did they find the money? They found the money with nurse educators. And so what they did is they gutted nurse education across the state. And that was back in the day when the Razor Gang came out, and so many staff members in many government departments lost their jobs in an attempt to try and find money to fund election promises. From a health point of view, the health department decided that their election promise was to shorten the waiting list. Where were we going to get money from that? Let's stop nurses going out and teaching nurses. Let's put all education within the organisation into an online platform. It's infinitely cheaper. We can sack a bunch of nurse educators, and we can have just a few core nurse educators to run online education. And that's what happened. And I became really disillusioned because I was employed in that time by an organisation that I genuinely felt had education as part of its agenda. But suddenly when money's running tight and they needed money for other projects like election promises, unfortunately, nurse education as a face-to-face model started to really take a financial hit, and we lost a good lot of good educators around the state, and we couldn't travel anymore. So I came home and I said to my wife, I'm really disillusioned by this. I'm genuinely convinced that nurses like a face-to-face experience. Whilst there is absolutely room to move into the 21st century with this idea of using online education, at the end of the day, face-to-face education still has a place, and I'm convinced that I can start running seminars and people will come to them. 14 years later, I'm running seminars and people are coming to them. And great organisations like yours are starting to see that there is also a market there. We don't have to do everything online.
We think you're the best educator nationally, definitely. You're also one of the few educators that I know of that still keep their finger in the pie and keep on the tools.
Oh, yeah.
What split do you have currently between doing ECT4Health education and I know that you love to travel rurally and doing remote work, which is Statum's bread and butter, and why we exist is to make rural and regional Australia more livable by increasing the sustainability of healthcare in those regions. Given that that's a passion of yours, how do you blend the two? And what I suppose what I'm asking is what percentage would you do of either in a given year?
Yeah, it does fluctuate from year to year, but on average, we'll call it 1 in 12. So essentially, in any given 12 months, a month of what I do is full-time clinical work. Mm-hmm. About 1 in 12. So yeah, I know it's not a lot. It's not a 50-50. And I like to kind of keep it mixed up a little bit. So I might go and do a rural and remote contract somewhere for a period of 3 weeks and then go and do some localized agency work in a big city ICU or ED.
And these are very rural contracts we're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, really small hospitals. So little facilities that might only be, say, a 10-bed MPHS doing, where they might only have one enrolled nurse and one EN on each shift and maybe, so 2 staff on every shift. One of those, you might have 4 or 5 inpatients, and when the doorbell goes or the ambulance arrives, you're also an ED nurse. So you're wearing a few hats. You've got that little bit of diversity. I love the rural and the remote stuff because that's really where I think I can use my clinical brain. You can be a diagnostician, you can work collaboratively. You're often the eyes and the ears for a doctor that may not be physically present in those little facilities. Your nearest doctor might be 200 kilometres away. In the case of working in places like the Torres Strait, as an example. So you have an opportunity to really expand your scope of practice, and I like that. I like to be able to do a little bit more than the mundane. If I find myself suturing a patient 1 minute and immunising a baby the next minute, you can't say that there's no diversity to my role. And I enjoy doing that because that's the stuff I teach, right? And I've got to have the credibility in front of a classroom.
Rob, ECT4Health has, from memory, over 100,000 followers online, which you're quite influential and you have your eyes and ears everywhere. How's the health industry going right now? And more particularly, what are the biggest challenges you're seeing?
Yeah, I'm probably going to shoot myself in the foot if I'm brutally honest with you. Look, what I'm seeing, first of all, if we can come back to the whole social media thing, the beauty of social media is that there's a platform for you. So if you're a Facebook kind of a person, there seems to be a demographic of nurses that love their Facebook. There's a demographic of nurses that love their Instagram, and there's those that love their TikTok. And they're all different audiences, and they all have different opinions on what's going on in the world, right? Generally, the audiences are differentiated by age groups. So you sort of late 20s to early 40s through, they're really sitting in the Instagram area. So they have a different opinion of their careers. They might have been nurses for 5, 10, 15 years. So you're looking through the Instagram nurse's lens to answer your question versus looking through the lens of a younger population, nursing students, first, second, third, fourth year, fifth year nurses in the TikTok space, and then I want to say crusty old battle axes like me, mature, very, very experienced, wise nurses that have been doing it for many, many years and probably have children that are in the industry as well, are really in the Facebook space. So I'm kind of got my tentacles in each of those different areas. So I'm hearing different messages, right? Almost certainly from the experienced group. The underlying theme is we just can't get enough education. And we are exhausted. We are burnt out. They're not grizzling about money. While everybody wants to say nurses could be paid better, and I totally agree with that. I am fully on board with the whole idea of we need to improve nurses' wages. At the end of the day, it's conditions. It is the heart and the soul that I've seen in nursing has been altered in this post-COVID 5 years. And that's what I've really seen in social media. The conversation is about we're exhausted. We don't want to do this anymore. We're looking for another career. And that's really sad when you're hearing that from nurses that have made nursing their career for 20 years. It's also really sad when you're looking at a TikTok audience or a younger audience that might have been nursing for 3 or 4 years. You know, they did 3 hard years or longer at university. They've come out, they've got a grad year or they didn't get a grad year. They've struggled for the last 3 to 4 years. They're 5 years in and now they're looking for a complete career change. Well, that's tragic. What are we doing in the industry that we are destroying old and new nurses alike? What is happening? I don't know what the answer is, but the themes that I'm getting is that bullying seems to be uncontrolled. It doesn't seem to be managed well by management of big facilities. The workplace fun and the culture in the workplace has to take some of that responsibility. So what can we do to improve workplace culture? You guys have got it right. Everyone loves working with you guys. There's a culture that you have in your workplace that just makes people happy to be there. Why can't hospitals be like that? Why can't they just be happy to be at work, to come to work and have that collegiality and not feel that every little mistake they make is being magnified out of proportion and all of the little wins are being completely ignored by their management? We could pat each other on the back a little bit and we could probably turn a blind eye to insignificant small mistakes and clock them up to learning experiences. I tend to think that we're overemphasizing everything negative that somebody does at work. And that's bringing down the morale. And I think morale then leads into this big issue of, I'm burnt out. Why the hell should I stay doing this job if I'm not being supported at work, if I'm not being recognized for my little wins at work? And if every time I go to work, I have to sit in the car and cry over my emotional support water bottle for 15 minutes before I get out of the car and walk into the shift. It's not right that people have that pre and post shift anxiety that is off the scale. It's crippling and it's making nursing exhausting. It's also impairing our ability to be able to make good clinical judgment at work. If we constantly have high cortisol levels and we're constantly stressing that someone's going to be looking over our shoulder to tell us off if we've done the smallest little thing wrong or made the smallest little mistake, I don't think we're forgiving each other, or I don't think we're caring for each other the way that we could.
Is this quarantine to nursing alone, Rob, do you feel, or is this an industry-wide problem we're facing where, I'm going to try and paraphrase some things here. My opinion is, in my management experience, is people come to work and they generally will want to give 100%. And the people who burn out or become disenfranchised are those who cannot achieve 100%. They're coming in, they're achieving close to 50 or 60% of efficiency, but they're giving 100%. And you can tolerate that for a shift or two. When it's day after day and you're consistently feeling like you're underselling your potential, you're not able to deliver the care that you want, then that quickly erodes, I think, into burnout and disenfranchisement in the role, right? Smuggle into that we've never been in a more litigious society, and that's not industry specific. So, much to your point, there's this fear, right, that you're going to screw something up and be held accountable to something that was potentially out of your control.
Yep.
Is my opinion is I don't think that this is quarantined to nursing. It is a nursing problem because it's the bulk of the industry and it's where bedside care is delivered. However, I think across every clinical and non-clinical group in each of these facilities, there's this continual sense that you're turning up and giving 100% and you don't feel like you're achieving it. And I don't know how to quantify that or, the silver bullet that changes it. But you're right, it starts to then erode culture and it erodes your passion for the industry, and we see people dropping out in disproportionate numbers that we've never seen before. And I don't know if COVID was the reason for that or if it was just a catalyst that exposed some cracks perhaps that were already there. But we have to deal with reality.
I think we define our space, our timelines to a pre-COVID and post-COVID. I don't think COVID has anything to do with it, but that it was a monumental event that happened in the world. I don't think COVID had anything specifically to do with it, but I certainly know that at a time of COVID, every one of us in health had to pull together.
And to use the features rather than a bug, again, my opinion, with using that as a feature rather than a bug, we showed that as an industry we could mobilise quickly and come up with solutions that we had never had to come up with before. So I do think that there's a way that we can do this. We can care for one another. There were people, in retrospect, it probably didn't do much other than lift morale, but there were people who were coming out on footpaths and clapping, and this was internationally. So as an industry, I do believe that we can solve for this, but it starts with the individual. Bricks and mortar and policies and procedures are not going to be the answer. So at the risk of sitting in the trench of the problem, what I would love to know, in your opinion, if you look at 3, 5, 10 years, what is the answer? And education has to play a role here, I think, because the most prepared nurses and the most efficient and the way you feel like you are delivering the best care at the bedside, back to my point where you come and give 100%, is when you feel like you are prepared and educated and capable to deliver that care. So how do we improve?
Look, as somebody who sits really low on the pecking order of nursing, as a pay point in the structure of nursing, educators sit at that middle management level, right? Like a NUM. So we're getting it from above and we're getting it from below. So there is a culture that needs to change where from above we need to be caring more about those that are below. And I think we need to make it go the other way around. It's interesting. I was in a facility not so long ago, and one of the directors of nursing from this particular facility came into the course, and she was saying, "Thank you very much for coming and delivering this education." Blah 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 blah. She said, "I would love to get to some of your courses, but I just don't get the opportunity to come back to my first love, which is nursing. I'm stuck in an office." We've got people right at the top that genuinely desired becoming a nurse, worked hard to become a nurse, and because they worked so hard, have found themselves in a position where they're now senior leaders within the organisations, not living their dream, and wishing that they could just put some of those senior management responsibilities aside to be able to come back onto the coalface and actually do some work. Yet when they come down onto the coalface, they're treated with contempt by nurses at the coalface. "Oh, she's only coming down here so it looks good. She's only coming down here to do a few sets of ops as a token gesture." And I just think that kind of contempt that we have for the seniors that are in our industry is corrosive. It works both ways. We're hearing junior nurses saying that the people in the top positions are telling us that we need to work smarter and harder and putting more on our plate. Yet we're also hearing from the junior cohort of nurses that the people at the top are out of touch with reality. But every time we try and get in touch with reality, and every time the top come down to our level and down to our floor to get in touch with reality, they're treated contemptuously, like they're just there under disguise. And I think that's really harsh. I don't think that we really respect in our industry enough. I know that, there's some amazing humanitarians out there, but I think the emotional intelligence has corroded in an industry that should have emotional intelligence as its number one attribute.
Rob, on that, do you have any examples of where as you're travelling around the countryside, anyone's doing it well and you always look for the bright spots and you go, actually, it is a challenge and there are themes. But is there anyone that, in your opinion, that you say, hey, you walk away, and obviously you'll say Statham, but yeah, let's steer away from that. I mean, if someone was listening in Ballarat or Bendigo and they heard you speak and they wanted to go see what good looks like, where's a region that's doing it well, or an organisation?
Wow, that's really hard because, again, I'm looking at through my own opinion eyes, and I'm looking at it as what is the measure of an organisation that's doing well? I think the measure of an organisation that's doing well is one that's not looking for staff. It's one that has a cohort of staff that turn up. Sick leave drops right off when staff are happy. There is a sense of fun and an enjoyment. People coming to work and really enjoying it. They feel supported when they're at work. They don't feel stupid if they don't know the answer to a question. People who are happy at work turn up. And so if you really wanted to look at one of the metrics, have a look at an organisation and see how much sick leave is in that particular facility or in that particular unit. And when you see sick leave going up, I absolutely think that it's not because everybody's getting sick.
Yeah.
I think that they're legitimately perhaps taking mental health days, and that has to be a symptom of an underlying tumour that needs to be weeded out. So if I'm going to look at a unit that I want to go and work in, I'm going to be looking at who's not hiring because they don't need staff.
Yeah. And Rob, that aligns to our values extremely well, that we do have a workforce arm, and when your workforce, when you're filling 27 out of 28 shifts, you know there's a root cause, and that's why we go into facilities and go, well, what's the root cause here? Because filling rosters isn't what you should be doing. It's breaking you financially, but it's breaking you down culturally, and that's, for us, the biggest indicator that a facility is failing, and that's why we get into the trenches and work out how we actually fix it. So yeah, good point. Good point.
So I had a course yesterday. I won't say where because I don't want to identify the facility, but I had a course yesterday and I had a number of senior nurses from this particular facility that were in the course. And I just said, look, I'd love to come and work with you guys. You're not too far away from where I live. It'd be really cool to come and do the odd shift in your department. But I'm only comfortable doing ICU and ED. I'll be brutally honest. I am not the guy that you want working in the ward. I just don't have that time management skills. I thrive on the chaos, right? To each their own. And I'm the guy that you want in the ED working alongside you. I'm not the guy that you want working in a surgical ward trying to figure out whether I'm supposed to revac the Redivacs, even if they use Redivacs. Right? That's not me. So I've been given advice from these nurses that, look, we would love to have you come and work in our unit, but we don't have a position per se in the unit. All you need to do is to jump on to, contact the organisation and get on the pool. And once you're on the nursing pool, then we'd be able to get you to come and work in our area. I said, my concern with joining the nursing pool is that I will be sent somewhere that I'm a fish out of water. And the answer to that was, our particular unit has 21 unfilled shifts a day. So if you're on the pool, every single one of your shifts could be in ED if you wanted them. There's not a risk that you'll be sent to another department because we are so short all the time. Now, that's a red flag. It's a red flag because it says, is this organisation under-resourcing its unit? Or is the culture in that organisation so poor that they can't retain staff and that's why they don't have enough staff? We shouldn't be subsisting on staff that don't have a core commitment to the values of that organisation because they're pooling just to that place on a shift-by-shift basis. That's not a way to run a unit. It's certainly not a way to get a cohesive team to get to know each other and play together and work together and cry together and have trauma moments together. And that's what we as nurses do, is we bond with each other. And when there is so much movement in a particular facility that you don't know who you're working with and you don't know this nurse because you've never worked with this nurse from one shift to the next shift, you don't know what you're going into. There's no predictability with the one thing that should be predictable, and that is your staff core critical mass, then you can understand why that collective anxiety rises within that organisation. I don't know if I want to work in an organisation that has to have 21 unfilled shifts every day, one facility, one unit. We're We're not talking about an unusual situation. And if I can just very, very quickly backtrack to what you were saying, Will, you're absolutely right. It's not just in our industry, because we're hearing the same sort of issues from our colleagues in paramedicine. We're also hearing it in medicine. And doctors are, although they're not vocal on social media about it, no, I think we're all in agreement. There is a house of cards and it's falling. And unfortunately, we are promoting good nurses, good doctors, and good paramedics into management positions without giving them any management skills.
That's another good segue, something that I wanted to talk about, and it leads in what we were talking about before, where we were mentioning around, a good manager wants to come down and understand the floor, right? So they'll quarantine 2 hours of their day to come and talk with their staff, do some obs, take a patient load potentially. One thing we don't give leaders, I think, are enough exit ramps on their journey to say, actually, I'm a good clinician. Clinical work was my passion. I had a crack at doing the numb. And you know what?
Yep.
I actually rather go back and be a CN on the floor. However, there's this stigma, I don't know if that's the right word, but there's this perception, right, that if I do that, then that's a demotion and it won't be looked upon favourably, whether from management or my peers or how I'm accepted. We do promotion in the industry. This is just an observation. We do promotion in the industry really well, as in we celebrate it. We don't do demotion well enough to support people back into roles that they actually would like to go back into when they go, actually, I'm not cut out for this management thing. So that goes hand in glove with what you just said, I believe, is then when we do promote people well, how do we then support them in roles, typically business management, for things that they didn't go to uni for? They became really good clinicians and now they're responsible for budgets. They're responsible for recruitment. They're responsible for having a crappy conversation with Sally because she gobbed off at Tracy. And where do I document that? However, they would recognise a deteriorating patient very quickly and be able to respond, but we don't support them in a new role, which is highly business management. So what are your thoughts on that? How do we
I totally agree. I deliberately stay away from management for that reason. I'm the wrong person to have, just like I'm the wrong person to have in a surgical ward or in a busy medical ward because my time management skills aren't there. My business acumen is also not there. You don't want me writing rosters. You don't want me disciplining staff. You don't want me having to have those difficult conversations. And quite frankly, I didn't become a nurse. I didn't become a nurse to manage people. I became a nurse to help people and provide care and compassion. And it's difficult to be true to why I became a nurse in the first place. If you want to keep sitting me in some chair that looks like a throne and giving me a set of tasks that I was never trained to do, why is it that we tend to promote our most experienced nurses? You know, you mentioned I can manage somebody's deterioration, but as a manager, I'm stuck in the office doing rosters and writing budgets and reports for the big chairs that are upstairs. Well, I'm sorry, I would have been out there on the floor in a heartbeat, helping my team save that life and recognising that deteriorating patient, because that's what I've identified with my entire life, a nurse. But no, you've put me in an office with zero training and you're expecting me to cope and be what's considered to be a good manager.
We've obviously got good leaders in the industry and they do that well.
We have, but we've also got bosses and we've got leaders that aren't leaders.
Yeah, there's leaders and there's managers, Rob. And there's the underpinning theme of education and it stretches across clinical and managerial is as they follow by the name of Jim Rowan that keeps ringing in my ears as we're talking, that if you want to be more, you've got to learn more. And you are what you learn. And going back to what you learn and investing in the people, and that's exactly what you do from an educator. You're clinically making people strong, and investing in yourself is why we partner with ECT4Health, because we want our regional communities to have access to people like yourself, not in Sydney or Melbourne or Adelaide, but in Toowoomba, and they can come and get the best education and be more. So and thank you for your time and thank you for your wisdom and thank you for your support over the last 12 months. We love working with you and we love your philosophies.
And all those things that Jaden just said, but also delivered by someone who, hopefully that's clear over the last half an hour or 40 minutes or whatever it's been, that is genuinely and deeply passionate about the industry. We are all consumers of healthcare, one way or another. And as pessimistic and perhaps scary as some of those topics that we covered, the answer is having good people who are still in the industry, who care about the industry, and are genuinely hand on heart pushing and rowing in the same direction to change it. And whether it's through education or taking on that leadership role to make a difference, or simply turning up day after day to be the nurse at the bedside to provide that compassion and care to the patients and to their colleagues, we say thank you. And thank you to you, Rob, for doing everything you do.
Oh, thank you. Look, I love working with you guys. It's so nice. I have people all over Queensland saying, oh, when are you doing another gig up in Toowoomba? And I say, I don't know, talk to the Statham boys. I don't know what my calendar is from one day to the next thing. Thanks to my beautiful wife that looks after all of our calendars. But I love partnering with organisations because I just know, and I love your events. Gosh, your events are fantastic. You cater well. You really care about people. You align with the same values that I have. You're getting, you know your job and you're doing your job well. And I think that that's got to be a euphemism moving forward for our industry. Nurses need to stay in their lane. They need to know their work. They need to know their job and just do it well. And the passion then starts to ooze through.
Rob, we've talked about the challenges in the industry and the problems they're facing. ECT4Health, how do you use your brand to influence and create positive change? We just talked about you've got 100,000 Facebook users, and I've just learned it's 300,000 followers. Tell me how you influence and encourage the industry through your presence.
Okay, so my social media, so that's 300,000 collected across the three different platforms. So about 150 in the two major platforms of
Facebook,
is huge,
and TikTok. Which is absolutely huge.
It is. It sort of has become a bit of its own. It's become its own snowball. But I think I'm the sort of person that goes on social media and I just do a very short video that's education. Now, a lot of nurses and doctors and paramedics that are in the social media space are doing content that's around what's going on in their life, or they might do makeup tutorials, or come get ready with me, or here's me walking my dog at the beach, that kind of content, and or doing some dances or having a laugh with the girls at work, whatever they want to do. Social media is anything you can want it to be, providing it's not offensive. Yeah. For me, my content is straight to the camera. And it's me maybe doing a 2 to 5 minute, up to 10 max, video on a question that might have been asked in one of my classes or asked in a previous post. So I might do a post on hypertension, or a post on myocardial infarction, or the way that we've changed our focus away from using oxygen routinely in heart attacks, or whatever. Pick a post that's in my lane, something in acute nursing, acute assessment and clinical management, and then I'll do a post on that. And who would have thunk that it would take off? At the end of the day, you get me. I have been called the bogan academic because the way I teach is not terribly academic, and I tend to just be dressed in whatever I'm dressed in on the day. So it's not an edited video. It's literally just me straight to camera and delivering just a snippet of teaching, and people can take it or leave it. And if they take it, they often will like it, and then they'll go, "Oh, I like the way that guy helped me to understand a particular concept." And I'm getting a lot of really nice comments from nurses that have been in the industry for 20 or 30 years, and maybe for the very first time they understood some heart sounds today, or they understood the cardiac cycle today, or they understood how renal function works today. After so many years, there's no one in the background, there's no one in their corner saying, "Oh, well, you should have known that." They're shooting on themselves. They're quietly watching a social media post that I put up, and nobody's judging them that they learned something today. They're learning with no anxiety. And I think that that's one of the beauties of being able to have a social media platform that reaches all walks of life in this industry, to be able to provide good, cheap, free snippets of education. And then to be able to follow it up by saying, "Hey, I'm going to be in Toowoomba with a program that Statham's put together. Come out and meet me, come to the course, and we'll do a face-to-face event."
Yeah, Rob.
Come and say hello. So I'd use that as a driving platform to try and get our courses and our conferences and our holidays some traction.
Rob, I love that. You've just identified problems in the industry throughout the podcast, and you've seen a problem, and you don't get opportunities if you don't see problems. And if there's no problems, there's no opportunity. So you have seen the budgets cut, education budgets cut. You've actually found the courage to go and invest your own money into this brand called ECT4Health, and now you're educating the population with a collective 300,000 followers, and you're putting content out there and educating the industry in a way that no one else is doing it. So congratulations, you've done well, and we
thank you. Look,
we appreciate your efforts.
It's a journey.
Yeah,
and you're part of the journey. So I want to thank you guys.
What I've learned is that we're missing a whole demographic on TikTok. We're catering to the middle of the road and the, what do you call them, the old boiler nurses, the crusty old.
Crusty old battle axes. Well, I think the nurse comedian Georgie Carroll says it very well. She talks about the young ones being the dolphins. You know, they flip around all like the dolphins, and then there is the old crusties like me. She calls them the augurs. they just cruise through and with a scale on their face. But yeah, at the end of the day, they've got hearts of gold, and that's what I think that I am. I know that I'm a crusty old uncle, but at the end of the day, I just love the game nursing, and the more that I can nurse, the happier I feel about it.
We'll put that on a shirt. All right, mate. Thanks so much for your time and your generosity. We love it.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Steve. See ya.
Stay connected with the conversation about enhancing livability through sustainable healthcare solutions for regional Australia. Visit statum.com.au/podcast to learn more, connect with us and join the movement towards a healthier future for our regional communities.